I'm sharing. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, and Faisal is coming online, so I think he'll be joining us as well. Um, we're just sort of waiting for Faisal to come, but meanwhile, we'll start because already I think it's been slightly delayed. So, as the title suggests, art from the wall to the palm of your hand for all. It's going to basically be a sharing of the practice of the individuals that are here on the panel, a little bit of perspective, a historical perspective, as well as we'd like to demystify this connection between art and technology. And I'm very happy to see a good audience interested in it. Because as you know, I mean, I was just walking down into the KLF space, and I saw that almost everyone has a phone, like everywhere else. So actually, we are constantly engaging with technology. You know, it's entertainment, it's connectivity, and, you know, in every way, we depend on either our phone or other gadgets. Digital technology is a part of our, existence, it seems. And we shouldn't forget the selfie, of course, because without the selfie, I think we will somehow, our memory would not be complete. It has to make it tangible. Uh, so when we look at this connection between art and technology, how did it come about? We're going to talk about it, the historical trajectory. Nusrat will be sort of tracking that historical trajectory. And Yasir will talk about his particular practice, which is very much in the public space. It is very kind of, it takes on partnerships. It also exists in a multidisciplinary way. And then we have Maham Chirag, who will, sort of elaborate on her particular practice, which is a lot about collaboration, working in the public space. And I hope we have Faisal with us. Faisal is a hybrid artist who lives in Toronto and is currently, hi Faisal, Salaikum, who
Assalamu alaikum.
is currently living in Toronto, but also is the curator for the Karachi Biennale, which will take place later in the year. Who kind of, he's, kind of in this entire arena of hybrid art. So he will be talking about his practice and how art and technology, while coming together, have changed perceptions. And, kind of how we have begun to look at art in a totally different way than we did earlier, which was, something static, something on the wall or three-dimensional. But now it's an experience. We walk into it. We interact with it. We become a part of the process of creating it and viewing it, and even pushing the boundaries further. So maybe we should start with Faisal. I will introduce our panelists once they come on to speak, but, sort of to save time, really, because all of you have read the extensive introductions in the catalog of KLF. So, Faisal, would you like to start by sharing your practice and talking about these changing perceptions that art and technology, as they come together, have, kind of changed? And maybe while you illustrate it with your own work, our audience would get a better idea about it.
Ji, Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you, Niilofur. Um, so let me share my screen and let me know if you guys see my screen as well. Can you see my screen?
Not yet, not on the.
Hello? Hello?
It's only showing up on one screen, I think, right now. Okay, perfect.
So can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, I think, Faisal, we can see it on the screens, but not on the projector. So that's okay. You can continue.
Okay. Thank you so much, Niilofur, for this really interesting panel conversation, and thanks for inviting me to talk about it. So I'll share a couple of my projects, and but before I do that, I think it's important for us to sort of look into different trajectories of different movements which happen in, especially in 21st century. When we when we talk about the changing perceptions, I think it's really important for us to look into these different mediums, especially at the start of 21st century and even before that, because I think it's important for us to reflect upon these changing perceptions and which is happening because of these different mediums. And they are not only changing our processes, they are also inviting us to think about the art making and art presentation, and also looking into a different audience beyond our white cube gallery spaces. So I think that is something which resonates really well with this conversation. As as a global audience is a flux of this accessibility. You're talking about that everyone was having a cell phone, but actually, what actually that means for us, right? The amount of data and the amount of real time conversation which is happening is a mind-boggling change for all of us. And with COVID now, we are forcefully pushed to have this digital transformation, which is also one of the changing perspective in our day-to-day conversations and sensibilities. Look at this data here. The Google, by the way, old data we have, 400 million active users. We have 560 million active users under Twitter and 1 billion active users under Facebook. Now, these are pretty interesting data points, which itself is telling us where we are heading as communities, as people around the world. And the third thing, which I think is pretty interesting, is how we all accept and evolve as with open networks, sharing information, sharing our wishes, prayers, our sentiments is a really interesting shift, which I think is also becoming one of the component, one of the medium for artists like myself who are looking into these behavior changes and how it's changing our perceptions. So think about these three levels, right? And I'll talk about some of my work, which is actually talking about these areas. Now, before we jump into that, I think there are little larger conversation questions which needs to address, and at least what I'm trying to investigate with my work. What is the role of art and how it's impacting of this rapid industrial and people transformation. And when we look into the subjectivity to objectivity mind shift in contemporary artists, this idea of, ideation, this process and possibility of art collaboration within the mediums. And the most important thing, which I think is we are going through right now, is the decentralization of power, institution, and shared economy. In next 5 years, we're going to see another shift in the art making and art practice and how the art industry is evolving. Metaverse, NFT, and few of others are really clear indications which we have. Now, I'll touch upon a few of my work, which I think is a really interesting trajectory based on the time and based on the medium I was working with. Art spaces or art encounters I did in 2008, which came out of the residency at Banff New Media. And I did 2 iterations with it in 2008 and in 2012. I was interested in the idea of connecting different. In 2008, I did this work between India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, and connected gallery spaces in real time for 3 days. Now, if we think about this now, it seems like, so now we have these Zoom calls, these cell phone technologies exist, which allows us to create these seamless engagement with different locations. But think about, this is 2008, right? The technology was not there, and I was trying to push the medium and trying to see how we can connect these different spaces seamlessly and have this dialogue between, social or cultural or geographical differences, how they will resonate to each other. So this is daily. It's connected with Bangladesh and it's connected with Karachi, and they are seamlessly looking at these different time zones. But at that time, what I was doing, because technology was not available, so I used a very low-tech sort of medium, which is just a pen and a paper, and audience are just reflecting to each other through these messages, through a very low-tech sort of format, right? And then it becomes this really interesting kind of conversation, time zones, different locations, but using a very low-tech sort of medium, which was at that time was not accessible at all. Twitter was not there, Instagram was not there, cell phone technologies does not exist the way it is now. The Skype and all these things were in a very earlier stages, so we were unable to resolve those things. In 2012, I did the same project that was between Vancouver, Karachi, and Bangladesh, and Toronto. And I used open public webcams as well in this iteration. But at this time, the technology started evolving as a technique for audience to share their messages and their conversation with each other. So, and that to me is a really exciting time back in the day, because now I had an ability to not only visually connect these spaces, but also allow audience to talk about their messages and stories in a very seamless way. And I used mobile at that time, but using a SMS because that was the starting point for us. In 2012, the extension to this Tweet Garden, which is again a public interactive installation and project, which happened again between Karachi, Toronto, and Brooklyn. And I was looking at this idea of trees and the symbology of trees in South Asian region and beyond, जहाँ पे हम वो मन्नत बांधते हैं, right, onto the trees. And I was very fascinated by this model. And parallel to that, I was looking into this change, that we start sharing our personal anxieties, confessions, and wishes and prayers virtually to all the open networks. And I start thinking about that they act like these massive information portals. So I'm developing this concept of a tree, and the tree become a metaphor for different audience in different time zones to collaborate to grow the tree. So each leaf is a wish and a prayer from different audience, and together they grow a tree, and eventually that tree become a garden. It holds our memories, and it starts sharing our conversation as we collaborate to grow this tree. And there are different iterations. What I like to do is I like to experiment with different mediums when I display my work. And I think that's an interesting shift, what we see from static gallery-based artwork, and when we look at different mediums and how it expands our accessibility to relate with different audience. So 2016, I was invited by Aachen Museum Toronto to reflect upon the building. And I was looking at, this is the time when US elections were happening. Is happening between Trump and Clinton, and we are looking at the massive data which is getting accumulated through Twitter hashtags. So I was invited to reflect upon the garden, which is a contemporary manifestation of Charbagh in front of the building itself. And that's where I started evolving this kind of work of looking at these architectural structure of the garden and looking at these symmetrical, these geometry which exist in the garden, and start investigating what actually that means. And what if I start mapping these conversations and start developing these patterns which exist in our own socio-cultural relevance, the colors formation, the type of making of these patterns and everything, and start developing this sort of digital garden, which actually evolve based on the conversation. So the tiles, the formation of tiles, and actually the formation of colors evolve based on the conversation between different people through Twitter hashtags. This is the data between Trump and Clinton. I'll not go in details, but it's quite interesting information for me as well, but also how the patterns are changing based on different conversations and different gender and different locations. It start evolving its form. By the way, if I'm getting Niilofur, let me know.
You
So,
have about 2 minutes left, yeah. So,
okay.
you can maybe talk
So
about, yeah.
this will become a large-scale projection on the building, and it sort of I was interested in moving my work beyond the gallery space, and this is the 3D projections on the facade of the building, which is a real-time projections where audience are responding to these hashtags in real time. I think I'll skip this work, but it's a very important work. This is again 2017 we are looking at, and which is a responsive sculpture in Islamabad. Manufacturers between 5 different locations. So it's a 3D sculpture which is embedded with LED lights, and it changes its formation at night and become a generative, responsive sculpture. It looks at these 5 different types of data from environment, from sunrise to sunset, wind, temperature, rain, cloud, and changes its patterns and forms in real time based on the environment it's in. Some of the iterations for it. And this time I used a cell phone as a method. And share with the sculpture, and the sculptures start playing their patterns based on their time and who is evolving it.
Yeah. Thanks, Faisal. I think we'll come back to some of the ideas in our second round, hopefully. Now I'd like to move on to Yasir. Yasir is an educator, researcher, and hybrid artist who's based in Karachi. He's been experimenting both with high and low forms of technology, and likes to engage his audience and also kind of explore the interactive possibilities. Some of Faisal's work was also in that area, but Faisal is kind of looking here. He's working with the the people here, and different communities. So Yasir, can you tell us a little bit about your work and how you collaborate and work with both ends of that technology? On kar lijiye.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to speak about it. And actually, I can't stop speaking about it.
Good, good.
Okay.
But you only have 5 minutes.
I thought I had 8. Okay.
I know, but because we started late, sorry.
Okay, no worries. No worries. Can we move to the presentation, please? Yeah. Okay, so I think about technology a lot. I think about it every day, and I've been doing that for the past very long time. I don't want to say how long, but you see, technology जो है वो हमारे lives का हिस्सा है. Just like plastic is part of our lives, plastic है ना? तो technology, devices, it's all about. Life seems to be all about technology. I mean, we think if we get rid of all the gadgets, we'd be back in the Stone Age or something. It will be like out in nature or something. So being in the city, the lifestyle, jo hai wo, it's all about, you know, a lot of data and apps and things like that. And obviously we use cars, we use trains. So all of these things are technologies. Radio, TV. TV and radio are a special kind of technology because they are media technologies. Because, you know, the TV doesn't do anything, it just shows pictures. So the content can be anything. So it's just the TV or the cable which is the actual machine, the technology. So when we talk about technologies, actually we are not talking about one thing. Every technology is different. So like if it's a car engine, you know, that's a different kind of technology from biology and health technologies, right? So just keep that in mind, that there are different kinds of technologies. Okay, so I'm going to talk about interactive and participatory works of art which use technology. Now bear in mind that there is, you know, low-tech technology and there is high-tech, or maybe digital, or maybe nuclear technology. So there are different technologies. So let's go on. Participatory का मतलब ये है कि जिसके अंदर audience participate करे in some way in the artwork. So they're part of the artwork in a sense. So next please. Okay, so ये एक artwork है 1989-1991 by an artist called Jeffrey Shaw. اور اس نے یہ سائیکل بنائی تھی, اور آپ اپر رائٹ ہینڈ سائڈ پہ دیکھیں تو ایک چھوٹا سا اسکرین بھی لگا ہوا ہے. اس اسکرین میں آپ سٹیز چوز کر سکتے ہیں. سو یو کین چوز آئی تھنک اٹ واز کارلسرو, ایمسٹرڈیم اینڈ نیو یارک. تو ہو کیا رہا ہے, اس کا نام ہے لیجیبل سٹی, یعنی وہ شہر جس کو آپ پڑھ سکتے ہیں. تو آپ دیکھیں کہ جو اس کی جو اسٹریٹس ہیں, جو بلڈنگز ہیں, وہ لیٹرز ہیں, آپ پڑھ سکتے ہیں اس کو. تو اب جب آپ سائیکل چلا رہے ہوتے ہیں نا, یو ایکچولی موونگ تھرو دا اسٹریٹ, آپ شہر کے اندر سے سائیکل چلاتے ہوئے جا رہے ہیں اس کے اندر. تو آپ دیکھیں یہ کتنا پرانا ہے, یو نو دس از, یہ 30 سال پرانا ہے یہ. اور نیچے والا جو ہے وہ آپ دیکھ سکتے ہیں کہ اوور ویو ہے. تو انہوں نے کیا کیا تھا کہ اس زمانے میں جب کوئی گوگل وغیرہ نہیں تھا, انفیکٹ اس وقت انٹرنیٹ بھی اویلیبل نہیں تھا, اور اس نے جو ہے پورے شہر کا نقشہ اس کے اندر ڈال دیا تھا ڈیجیٹلی, اور آپ اس کے اندر سے گزر رہے ہوتے تھے. نیکسٹ پلیز. ٹھیک ہے, تو وہ تھا کہ آپ شہر کو پڑھ سکتے ہیں, یعنی آپ جب بھی کہیں سے گزرتے ہیں تو آپ دکانوں کو دیکھتے ہیں, لوگوں کو دیکھتے ہیں, تو آپ پڑھ رہے ہوتے ہیں ایکچولی. سو اٹ واز دیٹ آئیڈیا. اچھا, جب سے اب میں کیا ہوا ہے کہ جیسا فیصل نے بھی کہا تھا کہ ہر چیز کا ڈیٹا بہت بڑھ گیا ہے. آئی مین یو سی وی ہیو ٹو بائی ڈیٹا ناؤ. پہلے ایسا نہیں ہوتا تھا, یعنی جو ٹی وی سے, ریڈیو سے آ رہا ہے, اخبار سے آ رہا ہے, دیٹس دی اینڈ آف ڈیٹا. تھوڑی کتابیں پڑھ لی, میگزینس پڑھ لیے, بٹ ناؤ ڈیٹا از لائک اسٹریمنگ. شروع میں فیس بک کی پوسٹ کم ہوتی تھیں, آپ پورا نیچے تک پڑھنے کی کوشش کرتے تھے, لیکن یو نو یو کانٹ ڈو دیٹ اینی مور, کیونکہ اٹس لائک اے ریور, اٹس لائک فلوئنگ. ڈیٹا از ناؤ ناٹ اسٹیٹک, اور جس کا مطلب یہ ہے کہ کوئی ڈیٹا جنریٹ بھی کر رہا ہے. تو کون جنریٹ کر رہا ہے؟ اٹس ایکچولی دی آڈینس. یعنی فیس بک پہ جو لوگ ہیں, دے آر ڈیجیٹلی کنیکٹڈ, وہ اپنی چیزیں ڈال رہے ہیں, ادر پیپل انٹریکٹ, اینڈ یو نو سم تھنگ ہیپنس. تو وہ فنکشنز انہوں نے کنسٹرکٹ کر لیے ہیں. سو اٹس اے سافٹ ویئر. سو اٹس دا سافٹ ویئر ٹیکنالوجی ان دس کیس. اب ایک صاحب تھے, ان کا نام تھا باڈریلارڈ. یہ از اے فرینچ فلاسفر. اگین یو نو ہی وازنٹ ان دس یو نو ویب اینڈ ڈیجیٹل ایج. ہی واز لائک یو نو جس اخبار ہو, اور آئی تھنک سی این این بھی نہیں آیا تھا ان کے زمانے میں. سو لائک 1990 اینڈ سم تھنگ لائک دیٹ. تو ان کا کہنا اس وقت یہ تھا کہ دیر از آلریڈی سو مچ ڈیٹا دیٹ ویو لاسٹ ٹچ ود ریئلٹی. یعنی ابھی اتنی زیادہ چیزیں اخباروں میں اس اسپن کے ساتھ, ٹی وی میں امیجز کے ساتھ آپ کو آپ کے گھروں میں آ رہی ہیں, آپ ان کو دیکھ رہے ہوتے ہیں. 1990 میں وہ آلریڈی اتنا زیادہ انفارمیشن آپ کو پوری دنیا کی آ رہی ہے کہ آپ کو ریئلٹی کا اب پتہ ہی نہیں چلے گا. ہر چیز جو ہے وہ میڈیا ہی ہے, وہ ہر چیز ایک پروگرام ہے, ہر چیز ورچوئل ہے. سو دس آئیڈیا کہ یو نو اٹس آل ناٹ ریئل, اٹس سائمولیکرا. سو ڈو وی لیو ان اے سیمولیشن, یعنی کہ is all real. He went to that extreme to think کہ آپ اب امیجن کریں کہ آپ کی جو پوری لائف ہے لائک اب آپ ادھر ادھر دیکھیں تو دیکھیں ایوری تھنگ از ڈیزائن. یہ کسی نے آرکیٹیکٹ نے ڈیزائن کی ہے, یہ پوسٹرز کسی نے ڈیزائن کیے ہیں, تو اس میں انڈیزائن چیز رہ کیا گئی ہے. سو اٹس لائک in a way it's saying that you've lost all touch with nature or real life completely. So now think about it now. Ab kitna zyada data hai, so I think we've really taken off somewhere. Okay. Right next to it, اسی سو باڈرلارڈ کا آئیڈیا یہ تھا کہ ایکچولی ہمارے ذہنوں میں اتنا زیادہ ڈیٹا آگے آ رہا ہے کہ انسٹیڈ آف این ایکسپلوژن دیر از این امپلوژن. یعنی وہ سارا ڈیٹا از لائک میکنگ این امپریشن آن آور مائنڈس ان فیکٹ. سو دیر از این امپلوژن آف ڈیٹا. اب وہ امپلوژن جب ہو رہا ہے نا, سو اٹس گوئنگ ٹو ریئلی فنڈامنٹلی چینج ہو یو آر اینڈ ہاؤ یو فنکشن. تو I use that idea of imploding data. بہت سارا ڈیٹا ایک ساتھ آ جائے, which is happening in our cell phones all the time now. So this was the first Karachi Biennale in 2017, and اس کے اندر ہم نے یہ کیا تھا کہ ایک so there was کسی کو 360 کیمرہ ہوتا ہے نا, جو کہ اس کیمرے چاروں طرف دیکھ رہا ہوتا ہے. So it's basically fish eye cameras back to back. تو وہ چاروں طرف دیکھ رہا ہوتا ہے, اور آپ جو ہے موبائل میں اس کو گھمائیں تو وہ گھومنا شروع ہو جاتا ہے, یعنی اس طرح کیمرہ پورا گھوم رہا ہے. سو میں مختلف شہر کی مختلف سڑکوں پہ, شاہراہوں پہ اس کو ایک کیا کہتے ہیں ہینڈل میں لگا کے 360 کیمرہ کو, اور لائیو گیلری کے اندر اس کو ہم اسٹریم کر رہے تھے. اس میں جو کراچی بینال کی جو دوسرے ایونٹس ہو رہے تھے وہاں سے بھی آ رہا تھا, یعنی بلڈنگ کے اندر بھی ہم جا سکتے تھے, باہر بھی جا سکتے تھے, کیونکہ اب انٹرنیٹ ہر جگہ پہ ہے. اور ہم لوگ اپنا ڈیٹا جنریٹ کر رہے تھے, جس کے اندر جو پارٹیسپینٹ تھے گیلری کے اندر, دے کو لک اراؤنڈ کہ یہ کہاں جا رہا ہے. اگر آدمی یوں چلتا ہوا جا رہا ہے تو وہ پیچھے بھی دیکھ سکتے ہیں, اگر بائک پہ ہیں گاڑی میں ہیں so you can look all around کہ کیا ہو رہا ہے. So we had a schedule, اور all of this data was coming into the gallery. So the gallery was in a way connected to the outside also. یعنی شہر سے وہ اس طرح سے کنیکٹ ہو رہی تھی کہ شہر کا ڈیٹا گیلری کے اندر اس کے ذریعے آ رہا تھا. لیٹس گو آن. سو یہ امپلوسو والا ڈیٹا کمنگ ان ٹو ون پلیس, وہ آئیڈیا جو ہے وہ اس میں یوز کیا تھا. نیکسٹ پلیز. اوکے, ایک اور بڑا انفلوئنشل آئیڈیا میرے کام میں رہا ہے, وہ اس طرح کا سمپل سی چیز ہے. جیسے میں آپ سب سے کہوں کہ یہاں دروازے پہ جو ہے نا ایک ایک پودا رکھا ہوا ہے, آپ سب جا کے اپنے گھر کے باہر اس پودے کو لگا دیں. تو جوزف بوائز نے آئی تھنک لیٹ 70s یا 80s 73 ان فیکٹ سوری, اس کے اندر اس نے کیا کیا, 100 درخت اس نے رکھے. اس نے کہا کہ ہم اس زمانے میں اتنا زیادہ یہ درختوں کا نہیں تھا ایون ان جرمنی. تو اس نے کہا کہ یہ 100 درخت جو ہے نا ہمیں اس روڈ پہ لگانے ہیں. تو اس نے آرٹ پروجیکٹ یہ کیا. نا تھنک دس از ویری لو ٹیک, اس میں کوئی ہائی ٹیک چیز نہیں ہو رہی, لیکن اس نے انسٹرکشنز دیں کہ آپ کو وہاں لگانا ہے, آپ کو وہاں لگانا ہے, آپ کو وہاں لگانا ہے. ٹھیک ہے. سو دیر واز اے سیٹ آف انسٹرکشنز, جیسے میں آپ کو دے دوں کہ آپ کو یہ وہاں لگانا ہے, یہ وہاں لگانا ہے. ٹھیک ہے. تو اس میں کیا ہو رہا ہے کہ دیس سیٹ آف انسٹرکشنز از لائک اے کوڈ جو کہ سب کو دے دیا ہے. اب ایوری بڈی ول ڈو دیئر ورک. اب کوئی صحیح کرے نہ کرے تو وہ کچھ کمپیوٹرز میں ایررز بھی آ جاتے ہیں. سو سو یو سی اٹس لائک اے کمپیوٹر. تو اس میں سب لوگ مل کے کام بھی کر رہے ہیں. اٹس لائک این آرگنائزیشن ڈیفینیٹلی. اس کو اس نے نام دیا سوشل اسکلپچر, بیکاز اٹ واز این آرٹ پروجیکٹ. اس کی جو انٹینشنس تھی, اٹ واز ناٹ ٹو میک منی, اٹ واز ناٹ ٹو رن اے نیوز پیپر, اٹ واز وٹ ایور دی آرٹ پروجیکٹ از سیئنگ کہ جا کے آپ پودے لگائیں فار ایگزامپل. تو یہ والا جو آئیڈیا ہے سوشل اسکلپچر, میں سمجھتا ہوں کہ اب جو ہے اس کی ایپلیکیشن بلکہ اپنے کام میں اسپیشلی انوائرمنٹ کے حوالے سے, ایئر کوالٹی کے حوالے سے, اور جو شہر کی حالت ہوئی ہوئی ہے اس کے اندر, یعنی کہ سینیٹیشن سسٹم بگڑا ہوا ہے, ہر چیز ٹوٹی ہوئی ہے شہر کی. یہ شہر پتہ نہیں کہاں گیا ہے. تو اس کو ایکچولی بچانا بڑا مشکل کام ہے. تو یہ سوشل اسکلپچر والا آئیڈیا میں اس کو یوز کرنا چاہتا ہوں ایکولوجیکل طریقے سے, یعنی ایکولوجیکل اسکلپچر. اس میں ہم کر کیا رہے ہیں کہ ہم نے ایک آرگنائزیشن بنائی, اس کا نام ہے گرین پاکستان کولیشن, اور اس میں ہم مختلف لوگوں کو اس میں ہم جوائن کرتے جا رہے ہیں, اور وہ نیٹ ورک بن چکا ہے. جو کلائمیٹ مارچ ہوئی تھی اس میں ہم نے وہ یوز کیا تھا, اور اس کے ڈفرینٹ پورشنز ہیں, اور وہ ہمارا ایک کام ہے. وہ کام یہ ہے, وی آر آل ڈیجیٹل بائی دا وے, یعنی دیز آر آل واٹس ایپ گروپس, اینڈ دین وی آلسو ڈو ریئل اسٹف. تو اٹس بوتھ ریئل اینڈ ورچوئل, اینڈ وی ڈو اسپیسیفک ٹاسکس. اس میں ایکچولی وی ور ایبل ٹو سیو دا 2 آئلینڈس. جو آپ کو پتہ ہوگا کہ پیڈا, پاکستان آئلینڈ ڈیولپمنٹ اتھارٹی, عارف الوی صاحب نے کل اوپننگ بھی کی تھی. انہوں نے ہی جو بڑے کنسٹرکشن اور بلڈرز حضرات ہیں ان کو یہ 2 تحفے میں دے دیے تھے آئلینڈس کے, آپ اس کے اوپر شہر بنا لیں, جو کہ مینگرووز ہیں, بایو ڈائیورسٹی کا خاص ایریا ہے, یعنی یہ پروٹیکٹڈ فارسٹ ہے 1927 سے. ٹھیک ہے, تو وی ور ایبل ٹو ایکچولی سیو دیٹ بائی گوئنگ ٹو کورٹ, اور مختلف چیزیں ہم نے کیمپین کیا, میڈیا پہ کیا. So they were all very coordinated kind of people, but all digital. So you see all of this social sculpture, ecological sculpture, all of this is happening digitally. So یہ آپ دیکھیں کہ different mediums اس میں combine ہو رہے ہیں.
Faisal, Yasir would love to hear more.
Okay.
But اپنا کام کا کچھ دکھا دیں directly, because then otherwise the other 2 speakers won't have enough time or other questions.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, so I'll speed up?
Just
speed up?
Huh?
Okay,
just show 1 or 2 images, or just very briefly talk about your work particularly.
اچھا, لیفٹ سائڈ پہ آپ دیکھ رہے ہوں گے یہ 1880s کی فرینچ پینٹنگ ہے. اس میں انہوں نے کیا کیا تھا کہ وہ فوٹوگرافی آ گئی تھی, لیکن انہوں نے جو برش اسٹروکس ہیں نا وہ بڑے کر کے, اور کچھ آپ جس اب ہم کہتے ہیں اسپیشل افیکٹس, بٹ اٹس پینٹنگ, تو وہ اس میں ایونچولی اٹ بیکیم امپریشنزم جس کو کہتے ہیں. تو یہ والی جو برش اسٹروکس آرٹسٹ اس کے اندر کر رہا ہے, وہی چیز ہم اب کیمرہ سے کر رہے ہیں. اور پہلی والی آپ تصویر دیکھیں تو یہ ایکچولی ویڈیو ہے, اور یہ ایک کانسرٹ ہو رہا تھا. اس میں ہم نے غباروں کے اوپر ایک موبائل فون اس کو آن کر کے, اور وہ پرانے والے نوکیا جو ہوتے تھے جس میں بیسک ویڈیو بھی ہوتا تھا, وہ اس کے اندر لٹکا دیا, اور وہ بیلون سے وہ اوپر جانے والے, تو وہ اوپر سے وہ گھوم بھی رہا تھا اور میوزک بھی چل رہا تھا. سو اور وہ آپ دیکھیں کہ جو کلرز ہیں نا وہ پھیلتے جا رہے تھے. سو اٹ بیکیم, تو جو سافٹ ویئر تھا فون کا, وہ یہ کر رہا تھا کہ ایکچوئل جو پکچر ہے اس کو ٹرانسفارم کر کے کچھ اور بنا رہا تھا انفیکٹ. تو وہ اٹ واز دا سافٹ ویئر ڈوئنگ دا پینٹنگ انفیکٹ. ٹھیک ہے, so let's go on.
I think that's a good note to end on. Software doing painting, right? So I think hamari next speaker hai Nusrat. Nusrat is a writer. A lot of you may have seen her writings in Dawn, Weekend. She used to write prolifically for Newsline, and she's also an educator. Nusrat will give us a kind of an overview of how some of the artists, the earlier artists, the ones who were, let's say, seminal in establishing this language with technology, how they began to work. So Nusrat, if you could
thank you,
that.
Niilofur. وہ پہلا سلائڈ لگا لیں گے آپ. سو ایکچولی آپ لوگ کافی سارے لوگ گیلریز جاتے ہیں, اینڈ یو ول سی دیٹ ایون آرٹسٹ ہو آر پینٹرز یوزلی ہیو ون ویڈیو انسٹالیشن اور اے کارنر میں انہوں نے کچھ ٹیکنالوجی کی آرٹ ورک لگائی ہوئی ہے. So there's something very alluring about technology that even painters who are working with pigment and brush, they want to include it and have it as part of their artistic repertoire. I'm going to look at Shazia Sikandar's work here with you to show how a miniature artist has moved over the years into digital technology. And I'm also going to look at one work by Rashid Rana, who has recently been in the news a lot because of his design for the Pakistan Pavilion at Dubai Expo. So what you're watching on the screen now is Shazia Sikandar's thesis dissertation called The Scroll. And when this was shown in 1992, it became a kind of landmark work because her painting techniques are very traditionally miniature painting techniques. She trained under Bashir Ahmed, so very traditional. But she has done something very different with this particular work. For instance, it is very long. It is called The Scroll, and it is 62 inches long and 37 inches downwards. So it's a very long piece, very different from the typical miniature painting. And then it shows the interior of a house. It's actually her parents' house. And it shows the interiors at different rooms at different times of the day. And you can see a young woman. That young woman is herself represented in her work. And at places, the young woman is almost transparent because she's trying to show that this girl was in a particular place at that time and has now moved away into a different space. So she's doing something very interesting by trying to show space and the movement of time all on a flat surface on the wall. And this play with space and time is something that she will evolve with, and she will evolve her own ideas, and you will see how it moves into digital technology some years down. So next slide, please. Okay, so after she graduates from NCA, she goes to the Rhode Island School of Design. And that whole decade of the 90s is a very powerful decade for her growth as an artist, because she studies a lot, she's exposed to a lot of artists, she has many conversations with other artists, and then she starts doing interesting things with the idea of beauty and aesthetics. And here you can see that this is a very distorted female form. She used to use, it's a form which is headless, because she's trying to make a comment about female empowerment, that, you know, what are women if you are not including their thoughts, their heads into a painting? Also, what is beauty? Why has beauty and femininity been associated? So she's challenging all these things, and she's also creating documents of the layers she uses in her very complex miniature painting. So like this is maybe just one shape, and then she would layer it with multiple other shapes. So, and this is interesting because it's a fragment. You can think of it as a fragment, which in digital language would be a pixel. So you can say this is a hand-drawn fragment, and it's going to evolve as time goes on. Next slide, please. Okay. Okay, acceleration in progress. Okay, I'm so sorry. So this is Gopi Crisis, and the thing to look for here is gopis were these cow-herding women in Rajasthani miniatures. So please focus on their hairstyle, because they used to tie their hair up in a knot when they used to go to the river to bathe. And that top knot is going to become part of a very interesting iconography for Shazia Sikandar. It's going to break away from the head and the body of the gopi and do many different things. Next slide, please. So here you can see the same gopis, but against a background in a Mughal darbar. And now this piece, it's called Spin, and this she created in 2013, I think. This is when she starts going into animation. And if we could see this as a video, you would see that the hair, the top knot of the gopis starts moving, and these black shapes, they acquire different forms. They look like birds, they look like insects, some people say bats. And it's also at times, you know, they become very dense, so they hide parts of the background. And the name of this piece called Spin, which has two double N's at the end, is a spoof on CNN. So that's where the NN comes from. And she's saying, because like media does news blackouts, she uses the iconography of the gopi top knot to create blackouts in the video. Next slide, please. And then we come to 2015. This is Times Square. And she was invited to show a work which evolves from gopi, from the gopi motif. And this is called Gopi Contagion. And you can see how large, now this is entirely digitally animated. It has these colors. And next slide, please. And there you can see you have just the gopi top knot, which has become this swarm, and it keeps moving. And I do urge you to look at the videos on YouTube. They're all there because they're very powerful and it makes a huge impact. So you can see that from 1992, when the scroll was displayed as a miniature painting, in 2015 she has moved onto this. And at the heart of this is still her hand, like the artist is drawing these elements, and the drawing which comes from the artist's hand is being converted into digital form. Next slide, please. And this one is a piece the same year as Gopi Contagion was shown at Times Square. This is Rashid Rana, who in collaboration with Shilpa Gupta showed this at the Venice Biennale. He converted 5 rooms with single stream video animation. And this screen, he actually, you're looking at the people in the screen, they are in Lahore. And he converted the room to look like the room in a room in Venice. And you could have the people who were visiting this palazzo in Venice look onto people who were visiting the room in Lahore. So he has collapsed time, and at one time, he is showing 2 different spaces completely interlinked. So they're not actually interlinked, but because of digital technology, you have created this very strange experience by which he wants people to challenge identities and question geography.
Thank you,
So,
Nusrat. That
thank
was
you.
very fascinating, but we need to kind of include Maham Chirag's contribution to this panel as well. Maham, a very important part of technology has been collaboration. And collaboration not only among artists and disciplines, but also crossing into traditional forms, music. So you are a sound artist as well as kind of a curator. You're now the assistant curator of the Karachi Biennale, which is going to take place in October, November. So how do you look at this collaboration that technology has been able to expand? Could you briefly tell us about it? Sorry, we're kind of pressed for time, but I would like to include your voice in the discussion.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Yeah, I think for me, actually, when I got introduced to technology as an art form, I was quite apprehensive about it. It's not something that I ever thought I would actually include in my practice. But because of my interest in sound, and when we think of sound, it is inherently a very immersive, embodied experience. And by embodied, I mean something that we feel in our body, that we navigate through. When you walk down a street, you are constantly orienting yourself through sound by, either something that's at a distance from you or close to you, something that's louder or like more of a lower voice. So what I wanted to be able to do was to create that experience for the audience, where it's not just that they're listening to a soundtrack, but you're actually experiencing that when you walk into a room, these sounds are coming from different directions. And that's both disorienting, but also a very different connection to the artwork. So that's kind of how I wanted to start, by including technology. And the only way to really do that was to collaborate with people, because this is not knowledge that I initially sort of had. And I was very lucky to be able to work with other sound artists and engineers, to work with a movement teacher, actually, because working with your entire body and learning to listen was an entirely other thing that, was part of the collaboration. And then even a filmmaker. So all of these different perspectives, being able to kind of include them was really important to getting a deeper engagement in the project. And I think that is where collaboration, as it comes through in art and technology, is extremely important, is that it allows us to, whether it's through access and making work more accessible, I mean, I think some of the examples that we saw of work, both with Faisal and Yasir, this idea of public engagement and kind of calling people in to a project was not something that was as possible before. And similarly, this collaboration that's happening across disciplines, so from scientists working with artists to ecologists to anthropologists to engineers, it's really allowing us to create a much more collective idea of what art can be, and including more people in that experience as well. So I think that is kind of really important for me in terms of the collaboration. And then one of the really interesting things that we're being able to explore this year through the Biennale is also connecting traditional artists and musicians and craftsmen to technology and technologists. And that's something that we wouldn't have thought of, because usually technology is seen as an erasure. It's seen as something where, you know, it's definitely taking over our lives. It's a part of so many aspects of how we do things today. But it's also a language that allows us to preserve traditional arts and craftsmanship. Because by creating that collaboration, we are giving importance to the knowledge that comes from these traditional crafts, but being able to take them into the future to not only make them accessible, let's say, to a Pakistani audience, but beyond that, to a much larger global audience as well. And you'll see this across the world where, you know, there's an entire movement called Afrofuturism. And there's movements around indigenous people where technology has become central to showing people and letting them experience the kind of futures that we want. So when we talk about art, a lot of times it's about being able to step outside of you know, oppressive structures that artists find themselves a part to be, or the communities that they're working with. And technology has become a way through, whether it's virtual reality or just being able to access something through your laptop or through the internet, you are hearing stories and experiencing stories about the kind of future that we want to build. So I think that's been a really important part of my practice as well, and collaborating with people.
Thank you, Maha, for encapsulating, you know, quite a lot of information in that small talk. But I think thank you very much, panelists, for sharing with our audience and demystifying that connection between art and technology. I'd just like to say in the end that, you know, whatever we use, we are using it as consumers. We're not really thinking of, you know, what goes into it and how we can push it further. And that's where the artist comes in. The artist, in a poetic, interactive way, is sharing with you all the possibilities that there are with technology. So I hope you'll give that some thought. Thank you very much.
Question and answer session.
Oh, we are very lucky. We have 5 minutes for a Q&A. Are there any questions from the audience? Or is the audience ready to kind of move into another session? I think we've answered a lot of your questions, right? So we'll move on. Thank you very much.